Hello and welcome to In the Spotlight with Quocirca, the definitive podcast on digital disruption in the print industry. I'm Louella Fernandez, Director of Quocirca, and today I'm joined by Stephen Miller, Chief Digital Officer at Xerox. We'll be discussing the opportunities around AI and how Xerox is applying AI across its business. So welcome to the show, Steve. It's great to have you here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Louella. Looking forward to the talk today.
Yeah, so before we get into the discussion, could you tell us a bit about yourself and your role at Xerox, please?
Sure. So, you introduced me as the Chief Digital Officer here at Xerox, is the role I've held for about the last 2 years. And really, it's responsible for driving technology disruption into the company and also commercializing that technology and selling it to our clients. So that involves a lot of automation and particularly AI. So that really is my role.
Great. So as I was mentioned, we're going to be talking about artificial intelligence, but it is a very broad and diverse topic. And, I guess it really came to fruition with the launch of ChatGPT. I think it was around 10 months ago, and that's really what kicked off this explosion of interest. But AI has obviously been around for a while. So I thought we could maybe start with talking about AI and the many forms it comes in terms of machine learning, deep learning, NLP, and of course, generative AI. So could you maybe tell us a bit about how Xerox defines AI within the business and how it's using it in different elements across its business?
Yes, Louella, great first question. I think certainly, your timeline is right. I think with Gen AI coming on this past year, it's really kind of up the value that AI can bring to the company and to companies and so forth, and that's certainly happening here at Xerox. But if we go back in time a little bit, AI really really went live for us just about 2 years ago with some very disruptive automation, or I'll say value-creating automation that it really kind of redefined our both our employee experience and our customer experience, and in our service delivery organization, where the AI helps our employees make better decisions, but that ultimately results in more uptime and optimized service from Xerox. So AI has been a key part of our overall delivery strategy. Really for the last 2 years. So that's kind of the timeline for our production AI. And it starts with some of the algorithms, the more basic algorithms, but now with GPT, you have the customer sentiment and high degree of learning, and it's very easy to interact with GPT. So the use cases continue to increase in value and for us as we deploy.
Yeah, and I know we'll get into a bit more of the detail around, different use cases that Xerox is exploring. But I think if we can firstly talk about AI from the perspective of how it's revolutionizing the future of work. Do you think it's all hype, or has it reached an inflection point? And where are the areas you think it's potentially disrupting the way we work today?
Yeah, another great question, Louella. I think, certainly in terms of automation, I think AI has been driving productivity for quite some time in some specific fields, a lot of the processing work and so forth, of course, starting with some more basic automation like RPA, right? So a lot of that kind of work has been automated over the last, call it 10 years or so. But AI is going to be, the Gen AI is going to be very disruptive, and that's what's coming now, right? So you hear folks talking about, the hybrid workplace is here to stay. You also hear kind of the other argument where it's, time to come back to work post-pandemic. But the reality is, I feel that the Gen AI value will really kind of cement the hybrid workplace as the way that companies kind of staff and have people working and where they work together and so forth. The Gen AI really enables kind of a virtual workspace globally, and I see it continuing to be disruptive in that way. I think a lot of that value is yet to come in the Gen AI space, but it certainly will be there. We're seeing it in our Gen AI deployments right now, so I can talk about that as well.
I do agree. I think, we see the opportunity for AI to really sort of give those productivity gains. And I think at the moment, there's a lot of hype and buzz around the ChatGPT side of it, but there's actually a lot more opportunity to help employees be more productive. And I think that brings us to the next area that we were going to cover in terms of the way it's actually being used in the workplace today, and particularly with the different demographics that we have in the workplace. Do you think there's a possibility for AI to support the different generations that are in the workplace today, and how the younger generation are perhaps going to be more in tune to using AI in the workplace, but also how that can actually support the older generations as well? I'd be curious as to what your views are in terms of adoption of new technologies like AI across these generations.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, and I'm seeing it firsthand, right? I manage teams of developers and programmers and data scientists and so forth. And certainly, the current generation is taking to the technology with their own creativity, I think, much more easily, because they use it in their everyday lives, right? It's part of their overall environment, their experience. So translating that to how they work is just something that comes very naturally. I see it in use case after use case, but I really see it in their ability to be creative with the technology, and that's so important for really driving the value in the use cases we have here in the office. So I think for the current generation, working with the new technologies, very easy translation from their personal experience to the office. I think for the older generations, it's a little tougher, right? That's where you hear, hey, it's time to come back to the office. When I hear that, I kind of think, well, maybe these technologies have not translated into their own daily use. And I think if they were, then you would see kind of that hybrid workplace really coming to its own, and certainly understand the expectations of the current generation that's really come into work using these technologies. So I definitely see a bit of a divide, and of course, it's my one of my roles is to try to bridge that. So we spend quite a bit of time on management of change and so forth here at Xerox and with our clients.
Yeah, and I think you talk about that sort of I guess a bit of inequity between the remote workers and the office workers, and how AI can perhaps help close that gap between remote and office-based employees. How do you think AI can actually better improve the productivity and creativity across those different types of workers and make them feel more connected and efficient at work?
Yeah, I think, that's a great question. I think that really gets to the heart of the value of these new technologies, and really where the use cases come into play. And one I like to share, just in terms of changing the employee experience, is in our service delivery organization, right? We have thousands of technicians that service our devices every day in the field, working with customers. And if you put yourself in one of our technicians' shoes for just a moment, say you're a brand new technician and you're going on site to visit a new customer, maybe you haven't been on site to meet with them before. You can imagine what that must be like, right? You're brand new, you've been trained, of course, so you think you know what to do, but customers going to have high expectations. They always do with Xerox, so we have to make sure our devices are up and running if there's a problem, or we're predictively managing them so they always work to customer expectations. So what our AI does in this case is it enables our service technician to know exactly what's going on with that device as they walk in the door. So they can see all the faults and alerts. They can see what's going on. And then a lot of times that's a little bit different than the customer's called in problem, or maybe they emailed us or something. So having the specific details walking into a client is so important. But where the AI comes into play is the AI tells our technician what it thinks the fix is, what it thinks is wrong, what it thinks the fix is. And it also will tell them, hey, don't go to the customer unless you have these parts. And if you don't happen to have, the technician doesn't happen to have those parts in the trunk, the AI will tell that technician when they'll have them. So it ties into our supply chain. So if it's going to take a day or two to get a part, our technician can call the client and say, hey, I'll be over tomorrow and we'll service the device then. So setting expectations, and then when you're on site, being able to fix it. So really, it changes the employee experience. It gives them the confidence and gives them the results that, and as well the client experience. So that's just one use case of the AI just working with our people to help them make better decisions and kind of change the overall client-employee interaction.
Yeah, and I think that kind of application of AI in the kind of customer support or predictive support is really powerful. And, I think, like you say, it gives those operational benefits, but also potentially sustainability benefits, because then it means engineers aren't going out to fix and travel to locations when they could actually do that remotely. So is this something that's powered by CareAR, or is this a different technology that you...
So CareAR is an important part of our overall delivery operation. That's our augmented reality product. And the way it works with the AI is if the AI believes that an augmented reality call or solution is the best fix here, it'll recommend that to our call center agent. So it's the AI is always looking at, okay, hey, what has best solved the problem, or what can prevent a problem from happening? And that's where the augmented reality fits in with the AI. So they work very closely together with our call agents and with our clients.
Okay, so I just wanted to kind of go into that in a bit more detail. So I know you've got something called Xerox Quick Resolve app, which I think is probably what you were talking about there as well. And I just wondered if you could share a bit more detail on some of the other use case scenarios that you have. So in additional to Quick Resolve app, also the virtual assistant and ChatGPT that you're using in your call centers.
Well, those are a number of our really important use cases, Louella, where we sell those AI products to our clients, and but we also use them here, right? And that's really one of the key strategies that Xerox has. Anytime we talk to a client about our AI solutions, it's always a use case that we have in production here at Xerox. So oftentimes when I'm talking to a client, next to me will be the operations manager, and they can talk exactly about what the deployment took, so what it takes to bring AI to value in a production environment, but also the value, right? What's the path to value, right? So we like to, we like to drink our own champagne, as we say. But to be specific about those use cases, and thanks so much for asking there, I think one of our most exciting products that our clients are telling us about, or really kind of pulling from us, is that predictive AI, and really what that is, it's a solution that our clients can use to optimize their print environments with us. And we of course have a lot of analytics that go with our devices. So if you buy a Xerox copier, printer, production printer, there's all sorts of analytics that support the job queues, support the overall management of the devices at a factory or site or so forth. But what the Predictive AI Pro really does is it looks at that environment. So it looks at a client environment and tells us and tells the client, hey, if there's the potential for an issue, here's the action you have to take in this specific time to make sure there's no issue. So really what you're doing is you're bringing that predictive AI to the customer, putting it in their hands, along with our technicians, and really preventing problems from arising in the first place. And that's where the AI, really leaning on the AI to look at the environment, understand what's happening, and based on all its learning, right? So all the machine learning, all our proprietary information that we have about servicing our devices, the AI references all that, looks at the overall health, and will make a very pointed recommendation if a fix or something needs to happen to maintain the overall environment. So that's one specific AI solution that right now we're deploying extensively with clients, and the feedback is very positive, right? Really game changing, I think, in terms of how they think about optimizing uptime. And to your point, Louella, it drives the ESG results as well, because rather than having our technicians and our clients support folks work reactively, if something happens, they can maintain things proactively at the right time when, for example, they're on site or whenever we're needed to take some proactive action. So that's one of our most exciting AI solutions right now.
Yeah, and just out of interest, because I know Xerox has always been very strong in terms of the analytics, like you mentioned, through its NPS engagements and helping customers improve their device optimization and placement. So is this something that is completely new, or is it building on some of the predictive analytics capabilities you already had?
This is new for Xerox. I think certainly our NPS analytics, provide that kind of management overview of what's happening in the environment or what has happened in the environment. I also think some of our vision products look to proactively manage job queues and so forth. So a lot of good analytics information. I think the difference is really bringing the predictive power of AI to be able to take actions proactively and really avoiding that type of uptime. So really moving from the kind of the overall analytics views to very pointed AI recommendations and specific recommendations. Leveraging the AI and our proprietary technology. That's really the difference that these products demonstrate.
Yeah, and I think it really demonstrates the power of AI. So it's not just the generative AI in the ChatGPT prompts and using those, which obviously are great in terms of productivity improvements.
But you had asked about those as well. I didn't go into those, but I think you're going to be asking about the GPT next. So I'll save that example for what's coming next.
Yeah, so I was just saying that I think, in terms of AI being embedded in products and service offerings, I think that's a really powerful offering that, potentially Xerox can capitalize on in terms of, like you say, helping its customers improve efficiency and sustainability and even cybersecurity as well, and, getting a better understanding of their fleet. So yeah, if you could tell us a bit about also the way you're using ChatGPT, as you mentioned, on the service side as well.
Yeah, it's good to spend a few moments on GPT. Very exciting technology. A lot of folks talking about it, but here at Xerox with our leadership support, we have use cases in production right now, and like we were talking about at the beginning of the podcast here, Louella, the journey to GPT value really started for us about 18 to 20 months ago when we first went live with our AI use cases. And those initial AI use cases really capture a lot of behavioral data and create what we call a large language model or database, really, that the Gen AI can now access. And that original AI captured behavioral data about how our people solve problems and also behavioral data about our products. And now with the GPT, we're able to reference that proprietary information and bring very quick resolutions or very quick information to our clients. So the way the GPT works live right now in our call centers is, as you described, Louella, it's an omnichannel virtual assistant. So it can read incoming emails from clients, voice or chat. And then using a kind of an overall solution schematic that includes a lot of other automation, a lot of other bots that tie into other systems, it'll read, say, for example, it'll read an email, understand the customer sentiment. And that customer sentiment piece is so important because, people like to talk about GPT is kind of like an impersonal thing, right? You're talking with like a robot or something. But since the GPT can read customer sentiment, if there's a serious problem, the GPT can understand that in the customer sentiment and route the call right to a person to pick up the phone. So what we've seen is with GPT, it creates a very personal experience for our clients. But the GPT will, say, for example, read an email, understand the sentiment, and say the customer is asking about a supplies order, they need an update or something like that. The bots will go back, look in our supply chain, see when those orders are going to ship, and then move that answer to another bot we'll create the response and then send the response out to the client. And that's kind of how that loop works. But it really starts with that GPT bot being able to understand real time what the customer is asking for, and then interface with a very automated Xerox internal environment that allows us to get the answer. So kind of a complex overall automated environment, but really breakthrough in terms of just how fast, how accurate, and how personal we can be with these omnichannel virtual assistants in our call center. So really redefining the call center environment for Xerox and our clients.
Yeah, it's amazing. So I know we discussed it a bit when I met you at the partner event earlier this year, and it was really impressive because it just, again, demonstrates how AI can really help improve the customer experience and make it faster and effective. So is that something that's available globally, or is it only available in certain regions?
I was just going to say, back when we met Louella at the Miami partner event, we were just going live, and so right now, that's for clients. It's available in Europe and North America because it really relies on a lot of our existing AI infrastructure, which is deployed in those particular regions. But that's right now. That's the current plan. So I think we have plans to expand our AI into Latin America, but right now we're focused on North America and Europe.
Okay, great. And the other thing that you also did a great demo of at the Miami event was the intelligent document processing and RPA solutions that you're offering. So I just wondered if you could expand a bit on those and also talk about some of the sectors and verticals that you're seeing benefit from your IDP and RPA technology.
Yeah, so well, certainly intelligent document processing, IDP, was very important to our channel partners, but it's a very important part of our overall digital services portfolio. And certainly, if you think about the Xerox brand and our right to play, as we're selling a product into the office space, our services into the office space, scanning and then intelligent document processing, and then automation around that, are really expectations that our clients have of us to be able to help them manage documents better. So in the IDP space, we have a number of products that now add the automation and the AI. Right, the IDP market is pretty heavily fragmented, but at the same time has a lot of AI solutions coming to it that are really redefining the capabilities that can be expected there. And certainly our AI-enabled IDP is doing exactly that for clients. So really doing processing high volumes of very complex unstructured documents. So even some handwriting, right? So but really the extraction and classification of highly unstructured documents with AI-enabled IDP is a key solution for us. And for our clients, it's just tremendously high value. And Louella, you had asked about the verticals, right? So we have these solutions are really focused in our legal vertical, in fintech, and also manufacturing. I would say are three. There's also I'll add hospitality as that's one of our growing areas. And you think about the hospitality industry, they deal with a tremendously high volume of unstructured documents a lot of times, and they have to do a lot of actions on those, a lot of redactions and so forth. So for audit purposes and so forth. So the AI combined with the IDP is really a solution that they've found of high value and high interest with us. So those are a few of the verticals where we've sold and we're deploying and have deployed the solutions.
Yeah, and I think it's a really interesting market. Like you say, it's very fragmented, but would you see that IDP is really helping customers that are specifically very dependent on paper-based processes as well as unstructured data that comes into the organization? Are you seeing, different types of customers that it suits more than others?
Well, I think with GPT coming on, Louella, you're really getting to the heart of the value proposition with your point there, and it's just a great point in that the GPT is really going to redefine intelligent document processing, right, and the ability of the automation to do the work that right now a lot of people do, right? So when they receive a lot of times a company receives a document, a person still takes some action on it. And can be very complex action, of course, but with the GPT enabled automation and that Gen AI enabled automation, you're really going to see some of the more complex tasks that people do in organizations around managing documents and processing documents really become automated, and that's really the key to unlocking the value of Gen AI in the workplace. And again, redefining the hybrid workplace with these new types of automation. So very exciting time for us in the AI field, and one I think is about to unlock a lot of value.
Yeah, and I think, like you say, it's been great to sort of hear how Xerox are applying, all of these elements of AI across its business, within its own operations, but also helping commercialize it for its customers. And I think in terms of the print industry, it's still very much a nascent market in terms of how AI is being used. Certainly Xerox seems to be ahead in terms of these particular use case scenarios. So why would you say Xerox is particularly well positioned to succeed as AI becomes more widespread across business operations?
Yeah, great question. I think really for two reasons. Number one, Xerox is a trusted partner, right? We've been around for just under 120 years, and we're not going anywhere, right? So for our clients and our customers that have worked with us for many years, we're a trusted partner. And I think when you're thinking about these new technologies, the AI and so forth, you want to work with a trusted partner, right? This is new value you're unlocking. It's somewhat disruptive. There's a lot of management of change. So when we sit down with a client to understand really the use case and the solution, we're really recommending something that number one, we have in production ourselves, and that we feel confident that can unlock the value that our clients are looking for. So it's really the trusted partner and the fact that we do this AI ourselves, and nothing we sell does not have a use case in production right now. So as we're learning about this and deploying it and seeing the value, we pivot that to our customers. One of our key strategies in commercializing automation, we started this approach with RPA. And it's really just extended, Xerox as a trusted partner into the digital services and automation space. So key strategy of enablement for us and our clients.
Yeah, and I'm curious, just as a follow-up to that, because I think there's always going to be a lot of concern and fear around any new technology like AI. And I think there's always been, the fear of potentially jobs being replaced, and also the potential impact it could have on people's jobs in general and their productivity. So, and also around the data privacy around these LLMs. So I was just curious as to Xerox, its approach in that space, and how it's actually tackling some of those potential barriers to adoption.
Yeah, Louella. Yes. So management of change is always a large portion of my role here at Xerox and with clients, right? Because the technologies are disruptive, they're new. There's always that kind of fear of unknown, fear of change. So we really try to kind of dispel a lot of that kind of the misconceptions and so forth, and really focus on the value proposition. And I've been around long enough now that what I've seen is not so much the disruption of people's jobs as much as really enabling them to move to higher value positions and higher value activities inside a company. Certainly the AI deployments that we're doing now, that's what's happening, right? So if you think, because there's, since it's disrupting or since it's automating higher value work, those employees are pretty valuable to those clients, to those companies. So So there's a lot of other work that they can do, a lot of client work, a lot of upselling work, and so forth. So that's kind of the pivot I've seen as these AI deployments have gone live. But the management of change is always going to be there, and I think it really takes a partnership between the us, the client, and the employees to kind of make that work and to embrace the technology and kind of see it through. Now, when you talk about some of the risks, you talk about securing that proprietary data, right? AI generates a lot of data. You talked about securing the large language models and so forth, and that's also pretty important. We work hand in hand with our security, our CISO, our security office, to make sure that our proprietary data is used properly by our GPT bots and so forth. But it's also we say it all the time, if we all go to the web right now and search for something, we'll get a bunch of different answers, some crazy stuff. It's no different if the GPT use case is referencing the web, right? So you have to be a little bit careful about that. We most of our use cases, our GPT, for example, the omnichannel virtual assistants are referencing our own large language models. So we have it relatively secured in our environment here, our data environment. But anytime you're interfacing with the web, you got to be a lot more careful. And some of those research use cases, or some of those use cases where we have to web scrape and the GPT web scrapes, it's a very isolated bot environment and secure environment where nothing's kind of going between, right? So that's how we think about it.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting, because I think, as you say, it's a really disruptive technology, but there are such great opportunities. And I think you made a really great point about value creation and organizations wanting their employees to focus on more strategic, high value tasks. So it's a way of automating the lower value tasks and helping those employees drive more value for their businesses as well. So I think that's something
Exactly.
that I think is a real opportunity for AI. So I just wanted to finish off really in terms of getting your insight in what you think is next for AI in the printing industry and what's next for Xerox, and perhaps you can share a prediction for 2024 for the industry.
Well, thank you, Louella. First of all, thanks so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and I'm sure we'll be seeing each other, in the months to come at different events and so forth. So, thanks again for having me, Louella. Yeah, I think I'll start with for Xerox, right? Because I think certainly in the print industry, print is, as a market is shrinking. And of course, Xerox has been, competitive in taking share there, right? So there's always a growth to be had, but really Xerox's growth is going to come in the digital services space. And in that services space, AI is going to play a central role. And when I say AI, I mean all of the AI use cases we just spoke about, but also what will be disruptive and what will be really highly value or high value creating will be the Gen AI, and that is just starting to come online. Like I said, we went live with our Gen AI use cases back in May, and we're now scaling it and expanding it. So I think next year is really going to be all about realizing high value in our Gen AI and AI use cases as part of our overall digital services growth strategy for Xerox, right? So very excited about the months and 2024 in Xerox for all of the technology value that'll be created and our strategic pivot to digital services. So very exciting time for us here at Xerox. Now, industry-wide, I think or beyond the industry, just in terms of the disruptive or the strategic high value creation of these new AI technologies, I think as well, you're going to start to see some very high value use cases come into play, and it'll start to change the way that companies operate, right? You're going to see really, I think, that hybrid workplace become kind of standard. And that's going to drive a lot of efficiency and a lot of value creation in of itself, but enabled with the Gen AI. So you'll really see a kind of post-COVID hybrid workplace really come into its own, enabled by the Gen AI value. And I think that's really an exciting time for employees that have a chance to use it, because it's going to redefine a lot of roles, going to create a lot of opportunity to add more value as an individual with these enabling technologies. And I think that's broadly going to happen throughout 2024. So very excited about the year to come in terms of AI adoption and strategic AI value.
Yeah, that's great insights and great prediction. And I think the AI space is moving so fast. It's going to be great and fascinating to see what comes next, and great also to understand how Xerox is using AI to power its digital services strategy. So thanks again for sharing that information and your insights. I really appreciate you joining the show.
Well, thank you very much, Louella. It was my pleasure, and look forward to talking again soon.
So thank you for joining today's episode of In the Spotlight with Quocirca. For more information, please visit quocirca.com and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you again for joining, and I look forward to seeing you in our next episode.